ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Well, there are still so many unanswered questions about the Biden family business dealings and where the president's son, Hunter Biden, engaged in very questionable locations with some very questionable and corrupt individuals. And also how much the cover-up of it helped President Biden in the 2020 election. And where does it stand now? Well, our next guest knows all about this all too well. She is the great New York Post columnist, Fox News contributor, and also the national best-selling author of Laptop from Hell. And Miranda Devine has another awesome brand new book. It is called The Big Guy, How a President and His Son Sold Out America. Miranda, it's great to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Rita. It's great to be with you.
Tell us about the biggest revelations in your new blockbuster.
Well, look, I think basically this takes up where the Laptop from Hell ended. We knew that there was corruption. We knew that the Biden family was influence peddling and basically selling Joe Biden's power during his vice presidency to China and Russia and Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Romania for millions of dollars. But what this book, The Big Guy, is about is the cover-up. And we first saw glimpses of the cover-up by the CIA, the FBI, the DOJ, the IRS, the State Department, back in October of 2020, just 3 weeks before that election, when we at the New York Post published the first of our stories coming from Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop, which showed emails in which Hunter Biden's business partners were thanking him for introducing him to his father, the vice president in Washington, D.C., et cetera. And our story, within an hour or two of it being published, was censored by big tech, by Facebook and Twitter and so on. And we found out afterwards that those social media companies hadn't acted on their own. They had been put up to it by the FBI, which was having meetings with them every week and before the election, and told them to look out for a Russian hack and leak operation, likely in October, and likely involving Hunter Biden. So, of course, as soon as they saw our stories, they recognized them for exactly what the FBI had been warning them against. And the FBI knew that we were going to likely be running the story because they had been spying on Rudy Giuliani's cloud for 2 years. And if they were watching and doing their job, they would have seen the email that came to Rudy Giuliani from the owner of the laptop repair shop in Delaware, where Hunter abandoned his computer. And that email back in August of 2020 was really voluminous and detailed and forensic. So the FBI had the laptop in their possession since December of 2019. So they knew that this was legitimate. And what did they do? They set about trying to block its publication or block our story from finding any reach with social media. And also, if they'd been watching Rudy, well, they were, we knew they were spying, but if they were paying attention, they would have seen messages between me and Rudy Giuliani in the beginning of October, my saying to him, hey, don't give the story to anyone else. We are definitely interested. So they would have had a fair idea that the New York Post was going to publish. And then we had the Dirty 51 letter from the CIA and other former intelligence officials saying that the laptop and our stories were Russian disinformation. That was, again, October 2020, a few days after our first stories about the laptop. And though that letter was completely dishonest, it wasn't Russian disinformation, as they surely knew. And that letter, we find out, many, many years later, actually went to the very top of the CIA, to the then Trump CIA director, Gina Haspel, who signed off on it. No problem. It went through. That letter, even though, as I said, the FBI had the laptop for a year or over a year, I think 10 months actually by then, and their forensic specialists had examined the laptop and cleared it for use in court. They said it hadn't been tampered with and that it was a legitimate purpose. So it's really election interference by those dirty 51. And you saw just the other day, 741 similar national security senior officials have come out in favor of Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. Again, trying to put their thumb on the scale, not lying this time, just showing bad judgment. But in our case, they actually said that it was they used weasel words, had all the earmarks of a Russian information operation. And so those, once you start going down those rabbit holes, you find the sort of shadowy hands of the CIA and other institutions in the national security space intervening to protect Joe Biden and then his son Hunter Biden. And, Hunter Biden was actually had membership of a CIA cutout organization. He was appointed to that prestigious role while he was a raging crackhead, and just before he was appointed to the board of that corrupt Ukrainian energy company, Burisma, that was paying him $1 million a year. So all along the way, and it happened from the beginning of Joe Biden's career in the Senate, when he was really an empty vessel at the age of 29, and he was immediately sort of taken up and mentored by various people attached to the intelligence community. And he became a useful idiot for them. And so whether it was embracing China, coming into the World Trade Organization, or pushing for regime change in Russia, neither of which are in America's national interest, Joe Biden was your man.
Wow. So how corrupt do you believe Hunter Biden and other Biden family members are?
Well, we've seen the sort of tens of millions of dollars that flowed into their coffers from, this Chinese energy company that's connected to the Chinese military intelligence for basically doing nothing. I mean, you don't get millions of dollars for doing nothing unless you're selling influence or selling, taking bribes. And certainly what we do know is that Joe Biden met with Hunter's Chinese business partners in Washington, D.C., that Hunter Biden, when he sent a shakedown WhatsApp message to his Chinese partners, he told them he was sitting with his father in Delaware and that, his father wanted to know why they hadn't ponied up the money that they owed him, that they'd promised. And that if they didn't give the money, that he would, his father would make sure that they paid. And this is money, whether it's from China or from Ukraine, where Hunter Biden was making, as I said, $1 million a year, $83,000 a month, for sitting on the board of this corrupt energy company for doing nothing. Again, it was to bring in the power of his father, the vice president. And very shortly after Hunter Biden was invited onto the board by the owner of Burisma, the pressure began to get his father and get senior U.S. Politicians involved in helping Burisma get out of the criminal investigation that was currently going on with the Ukrainian prosecutor general. a man by the name of Victor Shokin, and he was a career prosecutor, and he was investigating Burisma because it was, if not the most corrupt company in Ukraine, and one of them, and Ukraine being the most corrupt country in Europe. This investigation was going to threaten Burisma, it was going to threaten the owner, and therefore it would threaten Hunter Biden. And in fact, the prosecutor general was going to subpoena Hunter Biden and his business partner Devon Archer and interview them. And that was going to be incredibly embarrassing for Joe Biden and damaging to any future presidential prospects. So he made sure it didn't happen by forcing the firing of that very good prosecutor general who'd only been there for 10 months, but he was very energetic and he was just pursuing that investigation as he should. And what happened after that was that the Biden protectors just put out a story which the media happily swallowed, saying that this prosecutor general, Victor Shokin, was corrupt, and that in fact it wasn't Joe Biden that wanted to get rid of him, it was the Europeans. Well, none of that was true.
Yeah, and of course we always remember Miranda Devine, the son of a bee. His speech there before, I believe it was the Council on Foreign Relations. He basically said the quiet part out loud, President Biden.
He did, and he's that is a very embarrassing video for him, and amazing that it didn't sink his presidential prospects in 2020. But it didn't, because again, the people in the State Department and in the intelligence community and in the media just rallied around him and swallowed this cock and bull story that he was doing the right thing and doing American policy and helping the Europeans out because Victor Shokin was so corrupt. And in fact, I've traced through the lies that were told about Victor Shokin, where the crimes of his predecessor, the sins of his predecessor, were attributed to him by people under oath from the American State Department who knew full well that it was his predecessor that had committed these sins. So it was really it's a very tangled web. And unfortunately, at the end of it, it was Donald Trump who got impeached for the sins of Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's amazing, too, as we go through. I have so much I want to ask you. I want to ask you, Miranda Devine, about the CIA director. It's unbelievable to hear that it was the Trump CIA director who signed off on that letter, that it looks like Russian disinformation. How do we know that? And boy, what does that say to you about how deep the deep state is if Trump's own CIA director was willing to sign off on that?
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Yes, we know that from the very good work that was done by the Republicans in Congress once they managed to take power after the 2022 election, midterm election. And there were 3 committees. There was James Comer's Oversight Committee, and there was Jim Jordan's Judiciary Committee, and also Jason Smith's House Ways and Means Committee. And between them, remember there was the impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden, which ended up going nowhere. But certainly they used what tools they had, like subpoena power and ability to compel witnesses to uncover a lot of nefarious material. And that included, the money trail of money going to and from the Bidens, but also they were able to get witness testimony, and they also had whistleblowers telling them that this letter, this what I call the Dirty 51 letter, in which they used weasel words. They said, that this letter and this laptop and the stories around it have all the earmarks of a Russian information operation. But, that means they are saying it's Russian disinformation. They pretend now that that's not what they meant and that it got misconstrued in the media. No, they leaked that letter to the media. We've got the emails that show that they had a deliberate media strategy. And when Politico, which was the first to published that it was Russian disinformation, they didn't rush out and say, oh, no, Politico, you've got it wrong. In fact, the opposite. They found out James Clapper, John Brennan, they found out across the media, and they doubled down, and they basically were saying that Donald Trump was playing a dirty trick by ingesting Russian disinformation and then spewing it out on the campaign trail to try and damage Joe Biden. It was not true. There was nothing to do with Russian disinformation. This was Hunter Biden's laptop, and he was a drug addict, and he'd been reckless and lazy, and he was angry with his father at the time, and he felt that the entire family was disrespecting him, throwing him under the bus with the media, and telling Maureen Dowd and people at the New York Times that he was just a feckless drug addict and an albatross around Joe Biden's neck during for his presidential ambitions. And Hunter was furious because, as he said, he'd paid for this entire family for 30 years. He'd been the bag man collecting the money. He'd subsidized everybody in the family, and he joked, I guess, to his daughter, at least you don't have to give half your salary to Pop. Now, whether or not he really was giving half his salary or not, we know that Hunter Biden's business partners used to call him, Joe Biden, the big guy, as a sort of a code word so that nobody knew that they were talking about Joe Biden. And there's that infamous email on the laptop that talks about a particular deal with the Chinese in which 10% for the big guy would be reserved. And the big guy, according to Tony Bobolinsky and Devon Archer and others involved in Hunter Biden's business, the big guy was Joe Biden. And so, we just see time after time that Joe Biden was involved in this business, and yet these CIA people, former 42, I think, of the 51 former intelligence officials who signed that letter were CIA. And then we find out that from testimony in front of the Judiciary Committee behind closed doors, from the number 3, the chief operating officer, to Gina Haspel, that in fact the letter was sent to him for sort of approval because it was political, and the people below him thought that it needed to get higher level approval. And he looked at it and thought, well, I'm going to walk it across the corridor. That was exactly his words, and give it to the director to have a look at, because he wanted to make sure that it could be approved, and Gina Haspel waved it through, no problem. And so, therefore, a big dirty trick was played on the American people.
Yeah, it sure was.
Told to ignore this. Yeah, this was a derogatory information against Joe Biden, which should have been part of the due diligence that the American people were able to conduct on one of the 2 candidates for president. Instead, you had the CIA itself, and these former CIA people, 5 of them were former directors or acting directors, and the man who concocted the letter and organised the signatures was a former acting director by the name of Morell, and he was hoping to be Joe Biden's CIA director, finally get his dream job if Joe Biden won. So it was in his best interest to make sure that he destroyed any information that was negative about Joe Biden and help Joe Biden win and make sure that Donald Trump lost. And then we also know that letter was instigated by none other than Tony Blinken, who's currently the Secretary of State, but back in 2020 was a senior advisor on the Biden campaign, and he was a long-term ally of Joe Biden from his days as a young staffer in the Senate. He was friends with Hunter Biden and his brother Beau Biden. He's a bit older, but he had a sort of an older brother status with the family. He was always over at the family home. And when our story came out, the campaign knew they had a big problem. Joe Biden went to ground. And what does Antony Blinken do? He rings up Morell and he says to him, hey, have you seen this story? What do you think? And while in the testimony that Morell gave to the Judiciary Committee, he does not remember exactly the wording and of what Blinken said, and Blinken denies all. What Morell says is that he never had the idea to write the letter until he got the phone call from Blinken, that Blinken implanted that idea in his head, and that later that night Blinken emailed him a copy of an article from USA Today, anonymously sourced, but probably from the same cadre of people who wrote the letter or signed the letter. And it claimed that the laptop was Russian disinformation. So there you had a perfect circle, and everybody knew what they had to do. And when Morell sent these emails around to his colleagues and former colleagues to ask them to sign, he said that he wanted to give Joe Biden a talking point for the upcoming debate against Donald Trump, because he wanted Joe Biden to win. So that was it. It was a dirty trick. It was election interference, and it was approved at the highest level of the CIA.
Yeah, wow. That is such a wow. We just have about a minute or two left. I have two questions for you. First, real quick, why would Gina Haspel sign off on it? Why? What is her advantage, real quick?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't have any insight into her. I will just say that culturally, the CIA had a lot invested in Joe Biden. And from, as I said, his earliest days in the Senate, a man of very few talents, very few skills. He was just a kind of a grifter from Delaware, and he was elevated immediately on entering the Senate, had a lot of powerful mentors, and was put on the most prestigious committee, you would say, in the Senate, Foreign Relations Committee. He then went on to chair it or be ranking member for a decade. Extremely powerful position, and in that particular committee is very involved with the intelligence community. And Joe Biden, for instance, early in his Senate career, went on he was one of the first senators to go to China and on a sort of an official visit. And he went to the Chinese equivalent of Martha's Vineyard and was wined and dined by the top CCP officials and came back, just like Tim Walz, kind of brainwashed, singing the praises of China to such an extent that the Weekly Standard at the time, I think it was on their front page, just completely ridiculed him, mocked him, as they should have. And so I think the CIA, whatever the CIA or maybe rogue elements in the CIA, I don't know if that's the case, but the blob, so-called, which is what the Obama people called the State Department, the CIA, the Pentagon, all working together in concert to do what Joe Biden has been doing in his presidency, basically push for regime change in Russia, destabilize Eastern Europe, destabilize the Middle East. I don't know why that is in America's best interest. It's not. But clearly there are unaccountable people in charge in some of these agencies, and they do not have America's best interests at heart. And the reason they are so frightened of Donald Trump and why they will go to any lengths to ensure he does not come back again is because he does not follow their agenda. He just treats every problem on a first sort of name basis. He just looks at it and he figures out what's the best way of dealing with it. He's a property developer from Queens, and he just is logical and practical. And that is really alien to these people in power and who's been in charge and been able to rule the roost their own way for so long. The proof of the pudding that Donald Trump's method works best is how peaceful the world was suddenly for the 4 years that he was in office. Suddenly you had the Abraham Accords, peace broke out in the Middle East. He wiped out a couple of bad guys in Iran. Iran was broke. It was on its knees. It was in no position to be funding these proxy attacks on Israel. And we had no issues. Ukraine was not invaded by Russia. Russia pretty much kept to itself. North Korea was in its box, and ISIS was defeated. So I would much rather go with the Donald Trump foreign policy prescription than the foreign policy prescription that the Bob has assigned to Joe Biden, that he's gone along with, and that Kamala Harris likewise will go along with.
Yeah, it seems they are two peas in a pod. That is for sure. Well, this is a wow. What an amazing book. You are such an amazing journalist. Everybody be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. Miranda Devine, I know you have another huge bestseller on your hands. So many explosive details, peeling the lid of what was really going on behind the scenes. And you were there and understand it all too well. And boy, there are so many revelations in your awesome new book. It is called The Big Guy, How a President and His Son Sold Out America. Thank you so much for being here, and good luck with this awesome and definitely very revealing new book, Miranda.
Thank you so much, Rita. You're very kind to have me on.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.